Hey there, lovely soul. Welcome back to No's Stories. Have you ever wondered what would happen if two strangers signed a contract not for love, but for business? Well, today's story takes us into a world where logic meets longing and hearts learn to break their own rules. Let's dive in. The towering glass building of Knight Enterprises stood firmly in the heart of downtown Seattle, as cold and imposing as the man who led it. The overcast October sky cast its reflection on the crystal-clear windows, and on the 41st floor, Jasmine Holt stood still, listening to the quiet sound of rain outside, her heart in turmoil. She didn't belong here. At 26, Jasmine was already a successful lawyer, fluent in language, clauses, and laws. But this morning, she wasn't here to negotiate a lawsuit. She had come to sign a contract of marriage. A marriage between two heirs. A business handshake disguised as a vow of eternity. But Jasmine didn't know that the very agreement she believed to be emotionless would lead her into the fiercest battle of all, between logic and the heart. The door behind Jasmine clicked open softly, but she didn't turn around. Instead, she used the glass wall in front of her as a mirror, composing her expression calm, sharp, unreadable, before Ben entered the conference room. Ben Taylor, the man who carried the weight and brilliance of an entire tech empire, 33, devastatingly handsome, intensely private, and infamous for his vow never to love again after a public betrayal 5 years ago. "Miss Holt," he said, his voice low and measured, carrying the authority of a man used to commanding rooms far larger than this one. "Hello, Ben." Jasmine turned, her voice steady and unwavering. "I believe punctuality is the least we can expect from one another, given the circumstances." Ben's eyebrow lifted slightly, the only indication that he caught the frost in her tone. Both took their seats at the table, where the contracts had already been laid out. Jasmine opened her leather portfolio and pulled out a sleek Mont Blanc pen, a gift from her father when she made partner. 2 years of marriage, separate residences if we prefer, 4 public appearances a month to maintain the illusion of a real marriage, and an amicable divorce once our companies are successfully integrated. Her voice was cool, practiced. Ben nodded. "And my personal stipulation." She met his gaze directly. "Your public oath never to fall in love again. Don't worry, I'm not here for your heart." Something flickered in his eyes. Anger, perhaps, or satisfaction. She couldn't tell. "Good," he said, "because that's one asset that isn't up for negotiation." A month had passed since the contract was signed. Between closed-door meetings with lawyers and rehearsals with public relations teams, Jasmine and Ben barely spoke. Communication filtered through assistants and legal advisors. The silence between them wasn't ordinary. It was the kind of silence that grows between two people constructing a perfect illusion, careful not to look too closely in case they saw cracks already forming. The wedding day arrived, cold and damp like a sad overture. St. James Cathedral stood tall under Seattle's gray skies. Inside, the flowers were arranged to perfection, candles glowing against stained glass. Everything was beautiful. Cold, curated beauty, without room for spontaneity or feeling. Jasmine stood before the mirror in the bride's chamber. Her white silk gown hugged her frame, her hair swept into an elegant updo, tiny stones glittering at her ears and throat. She looked like a fairy tale princess. But inside, she felt like a character in an expensive transaction. "You look beautiful," her mother said from the doorway, her voice tight with emotion. "Though I never imagined you'd marry like this." "The company needs this, Mom, you know that," Jasmine replied, her eyes never leaving her own reflection. The cathedral doors opened. The wedding march began. Guests rose in unison. Jasmine took her father's arm, walking down the aisle under the sharp gaze of Seattle's business elite. And then she saw him. Ben stood at the altar, clad in a black tuxedo, composed as a statue carved from stone. But when their eyes met, something flickered. Neither cold nor calculated, just real. "You look stunning," he murmured as she joined him. "You clean up well," she replied, lips curving into a faint smile. They exchanged pre-written vows, slipped rings onto each other's fingers with careful precision, but when his fingers lingered on hers a fraction longer than necessary, Jasmine's heart skipped a beat. They had signed the contract, but their hearts hadn't. 3 months after the wedding, nothing about Jasmine's life felt as convenient as the contract had promised. She and Ben lived in separate bedrooms in their penthouse overlooking Lake Washington, but the distance between them was steadily eroding through nightly dinners. Initially justified as business discussions, now laced with heavy silences and lingering looks they both refused to acknowledge. Tonight, Jasmine arrived late after a grueling day in court. Her navy power suit was still immaculate, but the ache in her legs betrayed her exhaustion. As she stepped inside, she found Ben already seated at the dining table, a glass of red wine in hand, tension evident in the set of his shoulders. "You're late." His voice was calm, but the edge was unmistakable. "Unlike some people, I have to work for my success." Jasmine dropped her briefcase by the door, voice cold as steel. Ben set his glass down with more force than necessary. "You think I had everything handed to me?" "Didn't you?" she asked, a bitter smile playing on her lips. Ben Taylor, the golden boy of tech, emotionally untouchable, everything served on a silver platter. He rose to his feet, his expression darkening. "You want to know why I'm cold? Because the last woman I loved used my trust to steal half my company's patents." Jasmine didn't flinch. "That story's practically public record in Seattle, Ben Taylor, the betrayed genius hiding in his tower of glass. But you're not the only one with scars." Ben's eyes narrowed, not in anger this time, but in interest. "What scars do you carry, Jasmine?" "My first fiancé, the one I almost married, was sleeping with my best friend, and half the female population of Harvard Law." She gave a humorless laugh. "That's why I stopped believing in love." Since that evening's conversation, the chill between Jasmine and Ben hadn't returned. It had been replaced by something else, something far more dangerous: familiarity. Though they still slept in separate rooms, they'd settled into quiet rituals that neither had planned. Dinners together, debates about things that had nothing to do with business, silences that stretched, not awkward, but intimate. Each night, the distance between them shrank. A glance that lingered too long, a phrase spoken with a different meaning, a brush of hands that felt more like memory than accident. Then came the night of the annual gala. Ben arrived early as always. Beneath the crystal chandeliers, he checked his watch again. Jasmine had said she'd arrive late, court had run long. But he knew better. She was testing him. When the murmurs rippled across the room, he looked up. Jasmine descended the grand staircase as if the entire ballroom had quieted just for her. Her burgundy silk gown clung to her in all the right places. Her hair swept up to reveal the elegant line of her neck, the diamond earrings, his wedding gift, catching the light like a whispered promise. Their eyes locked, and for a moment, nothing else existed. "You're early," she said as she reached him, taking a champagne flute from a passing waiter. "You know exactly what you're doing," Ben replied, voice low, "and you know its effect." "We should dance," she interrupted, lips curving slightly. "They're watching." On the dance floor, his hand settled on her bare back, smooth as silk, warm beneath his touch. Her hand rested on his shoulder, eyes never flinching. "I feel nothing," he repeated, as if to convince himself. "Then why are your hands shaking, Ben?" Jasmine whispered. "Your body's betraying you." She stepped closer. The music swelled. They turned together, caught in a slow, silent war between restraint and hunger. As the song ended, Jasmine leaned in, her breath tickling his ear. "Take me to the balcony, somewhere no one's pretending." And there, beneath the stars, wrapped in shadow and the city's golden glow, their first kiss happened. No contracts, no pretense. Only them, and everything they could no longer deny. Rain fell over Seattle the moment they left the gala, a thunderstorm rolling in like a reflection of the one rising between them. They abandoned plans for a waterfront walk and returned to their penthouse, where silence wrapped around them tighter than any walls. Jasmine claimed she needed to review files for tomorrow's case and disappeared into the library, the room Ben often used to clear his mind. She settled into his favorite leather chair, draped in deep blue silk pajamas, her hair unpinned and falling softly down her back. But the documents in her lap soon slid to the floor. She fell asleep to the sound of the rain. Ben entered close to midnight. He had meant to head straight to bed, but the warm light flickering from the library pulled him in. The sight stopped him in his tracks. Jasmine, asleep in his chair, looking soft and vulnerable in a way he'd never seen her before. Without thinking, he stepped forward and gently brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. Her eyes fluttered open. "Ben?" Her voice was husky with sleep. "You fell asleep," he said, not taking his eyes off her. "I should go to bed." "Yeah, but you haven't." The next moment felt inevitable, like it had been waiting for months to happen. No more words, no more hesitation. Ben leaned in, and their lips met. This kiss wasn't a tease or a test, it was surrender. A silent confession of the longing they'd both buried too deep for too long. She pulled him closer. He lifted her effortlessly, carrying her from the library in a blur of desperate kisses, leaving fallen files in their wake. Their bodies moved with hunger, but their hearts were trembling for what it meant, for what came next. When they finally lay tangled in the quiet warmth of his room, there was no need for words, just the sound of the rain, just the truth of touch. That night, the walls they'd built around their hearts came crashing down, in the storm, in their silence, in the breathless beat of something finally shared. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the curtains, falling across Jasmine's face as she woke, still wrapped in Ben's arms. For the first time in years, she didn't wake to emptiness. She woke to safety. Ben was still asleep, his face peaceful, something rare for a man who carried the weight of an empire. Jasmine rose quietly, slipped into a silk robe, and stepped out onto the balcony, where raindrops from the night still clung to the railing. Inside that room, the walls had fallen, but outside, the world was waiting, and it wasn't kind. The bad news came that afternoon. Holt Maritime, her family's company, was under threat. A rival had been quietly acquiring nearly 30% of its shares through hidden transactions. Jasmine's face remained composed, but her eyes betrayed her fear. Ben found her alone in their home office, surrounded by financial reports, her hands trembling slightly. "What's going on?" he asked, stepping closer. "Someone's trying to take my family's company," she whispered, her voice strained but steady. "Let me handle it," he said, sitting beside her, his voice no longer cold but quietly resolute. "You don't have to do that. It's my battle." Ben looked at her for a long moment. "No, Jasmine, after last night, everything is ours now." A few hours later, he returned, after countless calls, leveraging every connection and favor. He had a proposal, an investment package big enough to buy back control of Holt Maritime. "What did you give them in return?" Jasmine asked. "My personal equity in Knight Tech? If the deal backfires. You could lose everything." Ben met her gaze. "No, Jasmine, I used to think everything was Knight Tech, but now everything is you." The Knight Tech board meeting began promptly, with Ben and Jasmine seated at the head of the table, not just business allies, but two souls slowly growing toward each other. Until the door swung open. Lauren walked in, the woman who had shattered Ben 5 years ago, dressed in a flawless power suit, eyes like razors, and a smile that didn't touch her heart. "Darling Ben," she purred, venom cloaked in silk. "Surprised to see me?" The room froze. Beneath the table, Jasmine gave Ben's hand a small squeeze. He nodded once at her, then turned to face Lauren, eyes sharp and unflinching. "What are you doing here?" His voice was flat, emotionless. Representing Sterling Tech, she placed a stack of documents on the table. "We're here to offer a controlling buyout of Knight Tech. I'm sure the board will be interested, especially when they learn you've let emotion cloud your financial judgment lately." Jasmine stood, voice steady. "If you're planning to weaponize his past, you're underestimating this board and this man." Lauren's laugh was sharp, her gaze landing on Jasmine. "Did he ever tell you that the one person he loved most was me?" Ben's hand clenched. Then he rose, slow and deliberate. "You're right about one thing, Lauren. I did love you." His voice didn't shake. "And you taught me the most valuable lesson of all, that real love doesn't make you doubt, The love I have for Jasmine is real, and for the first time, I'm not afraid to say it. The boardroom gradually emptied after the confrontation with Lauren. The directors left in silence, leaving Ben and Jasmine alone amidst a storm of unspoken words. Ben stood still, staring at the doorway where Lauren had just vanished. "Ben," Jasmine said gently. He turned to her. She didn't speak. She just looked at him, as if trying to read everything he wasn't yet ready to say. "I never thought she'd come back," he murmured, "and I definitely didn't expect to face her without shaking." "Because you've changed," Jasmine replied. "You're no longer the man chained to the past." He looked at her. For the first time, there were no defenses, no masks. "You make me want to step out of that armor," he breathed. "You make me believe in something I swore off. Love." Jasmine moved closer, placing her hand over his chest, where his heart beat fast beneath his shirt. "And you make me believe that sometimes the right man comes after all the wrong ones." No more words were needed, only a kiss, soft, certain, not from desire but from peace. Because for the first time they were choosing each other, not because of contracts or circumstance, but because their hearts finally beat as one. As they left the boardroom, Ben whispered in her ear, "For the first time in my life, I don't want to run, I just want to stay. With you." 1 week later, Seattle welcomed a rare sunny day. The sky washed clean after a season of storms. Jasmine stepped into Ben's private office at Night Tech, where he stood by the window, gazing out at the skyline. Light spilled across his face, softer now, more at peace. On the desk sat a small black box. "What's this?" she asked, raising a brow. "Not a ring," Ben smiled, "so don't panic." She opened it. Inside was a slender silver key, delicate, engraved with a tiny word etched by laser, "Home." "This is the first house I ever bought," Ben said, "back when I was just starting out. No one's ever known it existed, but now it's ours, not the penthouse, not the office, a place that's just for us." Jasmine looked at him, her eyes softening. "I've never felt like I belonged anywhere. Until you." "Me neither," Ben replied, taking her hand gently. "And I want to start again. Not with contracts, not because we have to, but because I want to. Because I love you." She wrapped her arms around him. Simple, honest, no need for grand declarations. "Then let's start," she whispered, "from the place we call home." Outside, the first spring sunlight poured over the city, and inside that office, two hearts that had once frozen themselves shut had finally thawed, not from weakness, but from courage. And this time, their love didn't need a signature to be real, just a promise, a key, and a hand that wouldn't let go. And this time, love wouldn't be a clause in a contract. It would be the future they wrote together, with no lawyers, no signatures, only soul-deep trust. What started as a contract turned into something no one expected. Thanks for watching, lovely soul. If this story made you feel something real, share it with someone who still believes in second chances. And tell me below, what moment from Jasmine and Ben's journey stayed with you the most?